This is Doc Higginmeister's Writing Project. We are finding the reasons for writing. This is episode number 8. Today we're going to discuss perspectives. Perspectives. Perspective is from what view are you looking at the action. You can make some choices when you're about to write. Now, before you begin writing, you need to make this choice of how are you going to tell the story. Now, I know you've done a lot of work in developing a story to get ideas. For example, I'm going to tell a monster story. Okay, so I know the monster is going to be really big, really muscly, really furry, with horns out of its head and big fangs. And I know that there's going to be saliva dripping from its mouth, and it's going to roar like a dinosaur from a dinosaur movie. So I know that that's what it looks like. And I know that I'm going to be the character fighting it. And I know I've already decided that the main battle is going to be in the store, may say the supermarket, in like the vegetable aisle. So there's lots of things to fly around. I got all those ideas. But now it's time to actually write down, and I have to make some decisions. How am I going to tell the story? From whose perspective? Now, obviously, you are the writer, so you are telling the story, but you can tell it as if you are the character. For my story, where I was going to go in to the supermarket and fight my monster, if I tell it as if I'm the main character, that's called first person perspective. And it's a great way to tell a story so that you can imagine what it'd be like to be that main person. And I walked into the supermarket and the doors slid back and I saw all of the aisles and I saw the chips and the sodas, and I turned to right and I saw the bread aisle and I saw the coffee aisle and I could smell the coffee. And then I went over by the vegetable aisle, and as soon as I picked up a head of lettuce, that's when all the trouble happened. I looked over my right shoulder, and out of the meat section came crawling a huge, hairy, crazy monster like I've already described. I just did all that in first person. I was describing it as if I was the guy who was fighting the monster. Now, obviously, I haven't actually fought a monster at a store. It didn't really crawl out of the meat section. It wasn't really growling. It's all made up, but I write it as if I was there. That's called first person. Now, first person is really great for getting inside the head of your main character, because when I'm there and I'm describing it, and I can describe my feelings because it's as if I am seeing it. Like, think of it like a camera. You've seen enough movies where a camera shows everything in front of you but nothing behind. But if the camera's in my head, then I'm looking over my shoulder and I'm seeing the meat section and I'm seeing the monster crawling over the case with its drooly drool. Yep, that was a good description. And I hear the roar. And I can explain how I'm so afraid and my muscles are trembling and I want to run, but I know that I can't, because if I let this monster go, it's going to hurt other people. And so I grab out my, I don't know, super laser gun and start blasting at the thing. And then that's when the mayhem really starts. But I can tell the whole story from my main character's perspective. First person. Now, that's great for those kinds of stories, but there are some problems with it. If I'm going to tell the story as if I was the main character, I can't jump to a place in the story where my main character isn't physically watching the action. Like, for example, while there's the battle in the store, I can't jump over to another scene where my wife is driving toward the store, because, well, I'm telling it all from my perspective, and I wouldn't really know my wife is driving towards the store because I'm in the store fighting the monster with my super laser blaster. Well, that's a limitation. It's not the end of the world. It just means that the main character has to be in every scene, and the main character's actions drives one scene to the next scene to the next scene to the next scene. Well, your main character is going to be in most of your scenes anyway. So it's not a major issue, but you got to be careful. If you're going to write it like I was describing, don't just suddenly jump over and start talking about, some other person, because that kind of jump in reality Make the story not as smooth as we want it. Okay? So that's first person perspective. I can do thoughts, but I can't do the thoughts of someone else. I can't get the thoughts of the monster because I'm telling it from my perspective. I'm fighting the monster. I can look at the monster and I can see that it's growling. I can see his eyes are angry. I can see he's trembling with rage as he throws slabs of meat towards me that I shoot in the air and blast to smithereens. I can show all that so I can get his feelings, but I can't jump inside his head to know what he's feeling on the inside. But my main character, since I'm telling it from inside their head, I can tell everything they're feeling. I can tell their thoughts. I can literally say he thought whatever he would think. Like, get out of here. If that was my situation, I would be quite scared. But then again, I'm supposed to be the hero, right? So I'm supposed to be brave enough to not run away from the big monster and shoot him. So, this is first person perspective. Now, I've used a monster story, and obviously you're not going to necessarily write a monster story, but it works for every situation. If it's a family story and it's from your perspective, you write it like you saw it. Now, a little bit of fun, if you want a little bit of a challenge, is to get a family story where you were there and write it from a different family member's perspective. Write it from your mom's angle. Pretend she's the one who's telling the story, even though you're the writer and you didn't see it from that angle. It's kind of fun to challenge yourself to look at it from someone else's point of view. What would she have been feeling, and write it from her perspective? That's kind of just a fun game if you want to. It's also helpful to kind of see someone else's side of things. First person perspective. Okay, we've gone on long enough. You understand writing in first person perspective can be a lot of fun and it can be very useful. Sometimes there's things you can't do because you make that choice, but that's okay. Every choice you make in writing shapes the piece of writing in a certain way, and it makes other things not possible, but that's okay. Every piece of writing has its own personality. Well, get on with it. And don't forget, have some fun.